Welcome to Inspire Campfire, a podcast where ordinary people tell their stories of extraordinary adventure. These are campfire stories meant to inspire the rest of us to light the fire within, get outside, follow our dreams, and return to tell our own stories. Ready? Let's strike the match.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Scott Wurzbacher, and today we're going to talk about how scratching an itch can ignite a whole new passion you never knew you had. That's exactly what happened to today's guest. Michael McLaurin is a family man from Charlotte, North Carolina, with a career in banking and operational risk. And he's here with us today to share a story. Around the time of COVID, he was looking for something fun he could do with his family that didn't involve a business in lockdown. The story that comes next is how Michael discovered an interest in learning to sail that he never knew he had. Before he knew it, he was planning a bareboat multi-day sailing expedition that he and his family made all on their own. For a long time, I've had a personal interest in this kind of sailing adventure on the open water, and I am so excited to share this story as we all learn about sailing together. Michael, welcome to the campfire.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we have some history. You and I know each other, and I just occasionally have been seeing your posts on Facebook. And a couple of years ago, it was like a picture of you on a sailboat. I'm like, oh, that looked really cool. And then like the pictures just kept getting more and more advanced, and the adventures kept getting more and more advanced. And I'm thinking, man, what's going on here? And so I had to reach out, and I'm so glad that we sort of reconnected. And I'm just so thrilled to be able to share this story. So at the highest of levels, can you kind of give us a little background on this journey that you just went on?
Yeah, sure, Scott. During COVID, my wife and I were celebrating an anniversary, and we were looking for something fun to do, but there was absolutely nothing to do, right? Yeah. So that wasn't going to stop me. And we both live in Charlotte. My wife loves the Charleston area, as do I. And so I thought, okay, fine. We'll go to Charleston. We'll just, have some fun, eat some good food, and make a weekend of it, kind of thing.
Yep.
And in my research of trying to figure out what I was going to do, I stumbled on an old travel article that mentioned that you could stay on a sailboat in Charleston. And I was like, well, that's fun. I'm originally from Florida. I've been around boats all my life. I'm an avid scuba diver. Never really spent any time on a sailboat at all. Never had any interest, frankly. Just wasn't my thing. But I said, this is something that I have never done before. I wouldn't mind trying something new. That's always fun. And so I found out where this particular marina was and kind of what the deal was. And it turns out to be the Charleston Sailing School.
Okay.
And they do everything from education, they do charters, and they also do yacht brokerage. And so I started to get a conversation with these folks, and they absolutely said, yes, we'd love to have you over. This is not something actually that they advertise anymore. They kind of use it as a hotel, but they are certainly willing to do that if you have interest.
You and I chatted about this briefly, and I think you had mentioned something about the article was like, it was an old article. And
It was. I don't recall exactly how old it was, but when I referenced the article, the owner of the company actually laughed and said, wow, I haven't heard about that in years. It's just not, this is not part of their normal routine business.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, they were all too happy to have me on board. Probably during the COVID season, it was probably a little slow anyway.
Yeah. So, I mean, basically this was almost kind of like an Airbnb situation, but on a boat.
It was. And the goal was you stay overnight on the boat. They take you out on a sunset cruise. And that's pretty much about the extent of it. And for what we were looking for COVID, it was fine. It was great. It was something new. And my wife and I always like to do something new, pretty adventuresome.
Yeah, but something happened on that trip.
Something did happen, yes. So we got settled in, and then the captain met us on the boat, told us a little bit about how this was going to operate, and we left the marina. And we were in Charleston Harbor. It was a beautiful sunset, and they hoisted the sails, and everything was great. But it wasn't until they turned off the motors that, for me, the spark actually happened.
Yeah.
Again, boats just have a natural vibration to them. They're noisy, and I'm used to that. But when they turned the motor off and we were just kind of coasting through the water, that was something special for me. And it just, all of a sudden, the world just got a little bigger. It was a whole new world just opened up on what you could do on a boat. Nevertheless, we had a fantastic time on the sail. It was a beautiful boat that we were staying on and had a fantastic time. And then when we returned to Charlotte, started to think more about could we learn how to sail? Was that something that could be a part of our lives? A lot of people do it.
Yeah.
But it's incredibly difficult. I feel like I'm capable to learn. So I started to think about it a little bit more.
Can we go back to that moment, like when the motor kicked off? Can you kind of take us to that? Because you said it sounds like something really triggered inside of you.
So, I mean, truthfully, Scott, it really was. It was an eye-opening experience to be propelled through the water without an engine. It was quiet. You heard the waves, but it wasn't uncomfortable. The boat has a natural rock, of course, but it just moved through the water in such a graceful way that it just relaxing is not the right word.
Yeah.
It was something different than relaxing, but it definitely was something that I had almost 49 years old, been on a lot of boats. I had never experienced that. And it was definitely an interesting moment.
Something just sort of clicked for you there.
It did.
Yeah.
When we got back to the marina, I started to really put together that my family likes to camp, glamp, I'd say.
Yeah.
And it occurred to me that being on a boat and sailing in particular, staying at marinas is not very different from the camping lifestyle. And while I enjoy camping, I absolutely love the water. So you put those two together, and now all of a sudden things are starting to click.
You're speaking my language, because I mean, I've done some RVing, but I also love boats. And this is something I mentioned in the intro. I mean, doing a multi-day sailing expedition like you did is something that's been kind of close to my heart for a long time. So part of the reason why I'm so intrigued by this story is just for my own personal learning, because it's something I think I'd love to do someday. But I love the way that this story evolved. So you guys got back to Charlotte and you start doing research.
I did. Again, COVID was still a big deal. So we were starting to think about summer vacations and that kind of thing. And I wasn't really thinking about sailing seriously at that point.
Yeah.
But again, I ran across another article online about a school that was referencing learn to sail as a couple. And that caught my attention. I was like, well, okay, it is kind of a team sport. It's hard to do it by yourself anyways. And so what would that actually look like? And it happened to be a sailing school out of Myrtle Beach. And so I called the owner of the school and just tried to talk about, what do you mean learn to sail as a couple? How does that work? And as we started to talk about it, it was a natural extension of, well, could you teach a family? We had not small children, but at that time, ages 11 and 13. And so not too young, right? But also not full-fledged teenagers either. So would it be something that a family unit could do? And while the logistics of working with the Myrtle Beach Sailing School didn't work out, the thought in my head was, well, maybe this is something we could do as a family. And so I contacted the Charleston Sailing School again and suggested, hey, is this something you've ever done? Would you consider doing it? I don't know how old you really have to be to learn to do this stuff. And as we talked through it said, sure, absolutely. We can put something together. You stay on the boat. You take the boat out during the day. All of your classwork, if you will, is done on the boat. But then you get practical experience doing it as a family unit. And it worked out really well. So we decided to sign up for our first two courses, Sailing 101 and Sailing 103. Don't ask me about sailing 102. That's a different story.
Okay.
And we decided to take those on together. We spent about a week down in Charleston. Half of that was doing the coursework, and we had a fantastic time. Of course, I didn't know how my children were going to respond to being on the water. I didn't know if it would be boring for them, and all that kind of stuff. And it turns out we all loved it. The kids took the same schooling and education that we did. I had to take the same tests. They passed with flying colors, and we all had a fantastic time. So that was our first little foray into, is this something we might really enjoy?
Yeah, and how long was that sort of course, that first, the 101/103 course that you took?
So you don't have to take them together the way that we did, but
okay.
Again, because it was COVID and because we were trying to frankly extend the amount of time that this would take, we weren't trying to just quickly get a certification and move kind of thing. We were really trying to engross ourselves in all this. So I think the 101 class was like 3 nights, 2 days. The 103 class was the same, 3 nights, 2 days.
Sure.
And we just kind of put them together at the same time.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I mean, it's like a perfect week-long vacation for the family, and you're immersing yourself in learning while you're doing it. And I think I heard you say that you stayed on the boat that whole time.
Yes, we did.
Just out of curiosity, how did meals work for that? Are you guys making your own food or?
Yeah. So again, similar to camping, part of it is what food works well on a boat. As it turns out, the galley that's on most of these vessels are, quite nice. We had stoves, we had ovens, we had a grill. So, and the school actually worked with us, and we basically told them the food that we wanted to have, and they went to the grocery store, picked it up, and dropped it right at the boat for us. So it was awesome. Piece of cake.
So it's just your family and an instructor or two?
One instructor.
Okay.
And yeah, for the entire time.
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, it sounds like a really fun vacation. I'm curious, because when the first trip that you guys went, you basically were just staying on the boat. Now you're actually getting your hands dirty and actually learning. What were some of the things that you learned in that first course?
Yeah. So the first course is all about the physics of sailing. How does a boat actually work with the wind? And then the names of the boat. So I thought one of the interesting things with learning all this stuff was it's like learning a different language. Everything on a boat has a different word associated with it than what you would think that it has. There's no front and back, it's bow and stern, it's starboard and port, right? Everything on the boat that you could point at has a unique name that you've never heard of. So you really had to learn all that stuff. So if the instructor says, I need you to tie a bow line on that cleat and attach it to the clew of that sail, you have to know what that means. Otherwise, you're like, well, what? So the first course is all about just the terminology of a boat, and then some of the basics of the physics of how does a boat actually sail with the wind. The concepts of you can't just sail a boat wherever you want to go, right? If the wind is coming in front of you, you can't sail in that direction. It just doesn't work that way. So, and it's one thing to be told that. It's another thing to actually point a boat into the wind and realize, you can't go anywhere. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So learning all of that, feeling weather helm when the wind, if you get too close to the wind, the boat wants to actually go into the wind further. And as the skipper, you actually have to kind of fight against that.
Yeah.
And the first time it happened, it really caught me off guard. I was expecting it. I knew it would happen, but I didn't realize just how powerful those forces are.
Yeah.
Learning how all of those things fit together was, that's why they call it 101.
Hey everyone, it's Scott here. This podcast is a passion project for me because I absolutely love adventure. And it's thanks to the effort of my residential real estate team here in Charlotte, North Carolina, that many of you know as the W Realty Group, that this podcast gets funded. This awesome group of people have unmatched levels of competence and caring for our clients. If you know of anyone looking to buy or sell a home, Our team serves the Charlotte, North Carolina market, but we can also help you find an agent anywhere throughout the US or Canada through our highly connected network. When you support our real estate business, you are also supporting this podcast. Thanks for listening, and thanks for your referrals. No, it's so cool. I'm so intrigued. I'm curious if you could describe the boat that you were on for that course.
Yes, I think that was a 28-foot monohull for the 101 course.
Okay.
I forget the maker, but it was your basic standard boat that would be used for maybe an overnighter. You
Okay.
wouldn't really go too far out in it, but it was about 28 feet long. It did have 2 helms, which was really nice, but it was just a very nice beginner boat.
And enough room for everybody in your family plus the instructor.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's not the boat that we were staying on, by the way, but that is the boat that we took out for the sailing lessons. We were actually staying on a 42-foot Catalina monohull, which was just a gorgeous boat.
Got it. Okay. So for the 101 course, you stayed on a different boat than you went out and did the lessons on. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it just sounds like such a fun way to do a vacation, to like integrate learning. It's certainly something that piques my interest. How did the rest of the family do on that trip?
They did fantastic. I was really proud of them. The kids in particular, especially at their age, they were attentive. They learned. They asked questions. Like I said, they aced their tests. They did really well. And my wife, who hasn't spent as much time on the water as I have, also came a long way in learning to anticipate what the boat is going to do. These big boats don't work like cars, right? They're not as responsive. Yeah. The physics of how a boat moves is just different. And then when you add the sails on top of it, there's a whole lot going on there that it looks simple. And when you get it, I think it's simple, but there's an initial steep learning curve.
Yeah, makes sense. I'm curious, like, what your intentionality was going into this first course. Was it just kind of like, let's take it one step at a time, or did you kind of have a long game in mind?
I did not have a long game at all. At the time, it was, we'd like to go do something. The world has shut down.
Yeah.
Our options are limited. So this is something that we could do. It's new, it's fresh, something no one has done before in our family. So let's give it a go and learn something new. I really was, the only long game I had on that was I'm aware that there are some life lessons that you learn by being on the water. Not just the practical stuff with tying ropes and that kind of stuff, but being mindful of marine life, being mindful of the planet that we live on, and trying to make sure that we protect it as much as we can. My oldest is an aspiring marine biologist.
Nice.
So being close to the water kind of checked a lot of those types of boxes. Yeah. But I really did not have at the time, intention of taking this too far. The goal was, let's take a baby step. Yep. See if we even like this, and then we'll go from there. And what we figured out was, this is something that we think we would enjoy. So we decided to sign up for our Sailing 104 course, which is basically your intro to bareboat sailing. This is, they are training you to plan and navigate a vessel of around 40 feet and be able to navigate that safely. And that's what we did.
So in the intro, I acted like I knew what I was talking about. I said that you guys did a bareboat expedition. I just learned that term from you yesterday. So for those listening, I think that like I know what I'm talking about. I just figured that out. But for listeners, could you explain what that means, bareboat?
Sure. So when you charter a vessel, usually if you're chartering a vessel, someone that knows how to drive the boat is going to be on the boat, right? Yep. When you charter a bareboat vessel, you get the boat and you're responsible for everything that happens on it. And that's the basic difference.
Got it. So that was kind of what we're sort of working towards. So tell us about this 104 course.
Yeah, so the 104 builds on all the skills that you've learned, navigating the waters, learning how, but they take it to the next piece where you're working the VHF radio, you're learning how to plot courses, you're learning how to read all your nautical charts, right? They look incredibly complicated, and they are, but when you learn how to read them, just like reading a book, it's not that difficult, and you just have to know how to do it. We had to be away from the marina at least one night. That's part of the certification process. So we had to find an area on the ICW and anchor. So all of those steps kind of contribute to that. You learn how to provision the boat. That means basically grocery shop. You learn all the safety equipment. So what weather gear that you need to bring on board, how some of the life vests might work should you ever need them, those types of things.
You mentioned the ICW for listeners that aren't familiar.
That is the Intercoastal Waterway, and it's basically a strip of water that goes from, I don't know on the north side how far it goes up. I don't think it's all the way to Maine. It may be, but it goes all the way down around Florida and all the way over almost to Texas, if not all the way to Texas. But it's basically a channel that is sometimes you're in the ocean, sometimes you're not in the ocean, but it's basically a channel of protected waterways that you can navigate.
Yeah. And that's where you guys are essentially practicing in that Charleston area.
Correct.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask you, so you talked about certification, and these courses are obviously have names, 101, 103, 104. Who is the organization that sponsors these courses?
So we went through the ASA. It's the American Sailing Association.
Okay.
There is another organization that is globally accredited, if you will. I'm blanking on the name, to be honest with you, but the ASA is a standard global training certification agency that is respected across the globe.
Got it. So this second round of coursework that you guys did was the 104. And what is that certification called, and what is it? Does it give you any sort of authority to do something?
It's titled Bareboat Cruising.
Okay.
And it's I was really impressed with the way the course was laid out. It is intended to teach people like myself how to be self-sufficient on your own boat of around 40 feet-ish in size.
Yeah.
That's a big pill to swallow, I'll be honest with you. But they specifically are trying to teach you can only go so deep in some of these topics, right? And sailing, trimming your sail and navigating at night and advanced chart reading and advanced course plotting. These types of concepts, they might acknowledge that they're out there, but they can't be covered in the course, right? So I still have a long way to go in my knowledge journey.
Sure.
But we know enough to safely take the boat, get the sails going, sail it where we want to go, plot the course to do that, avoid other boats and other traffic that might be a problem. On my trip, we had to contact the bridges on the ICW to give us an opening.
Okay.
So we had to know how to communicate with the bridge operators and the marinas that we stopped at along the way. So we had to learn all of those things in order to do this trip safely.
Yeah. So the 104 course, equally fun like the first one was, equally kind of a vacation type experience?
It was. On the 104, we decided to purposely do that course on a catamaran.
Okay.
A monohull has one hull, a catamaran has two hulls.
Yeah.
And we specifically wanted to do it on a catamaran because we wanted the experience of sailing that kind of boat. It's a little different than the monohulls, the way it sails.
Okay.
Some of the systems are different. They have two motors, which doesn't sound all that important, but it gives you extreme flexibility with how you navigate a marina when you have two motors instead of one.
Got it.
These boats can basically do a 360 without moving forward or backwards, and that gives you some extreme flexibility.
Yeah.
So we really wanted that experience. They're also a little bit more comfortable. They've got a little bit more living space, if you will. And so we wanted to do that on a catamaran, and it was, I'm so glad that we did. But yes, it was a great vacation. Again, another 3 nights, 4 days kind of thing. One of those nights had to be at anchor, and so we had to learn all about how to set an anchor, make sure it's not going to go anywhere, and there's different lights that you put on at night and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So I have to ask, like, help us paint the picture here. Is this dad like, all right, come on, kids, we're going to go do this thing? Or was the whole family like really excited and in on this?
Yeah. So everybody was in. I'll give you that. Everybody was totally interested. I don't know that as a family we would have pursued this had I not suggested it. I don't. There isn't anyone else in the family that is saying, "Hey, I really want to go sailing. Yeah, let's go do that now." So I was probably the catalyst for it, but everyone was jumped right in and said, "Let's do this." They eagerly were interested in the learning, and we all did very well with all that.
Yeah, it's awesome. So was this like consecutive years, or were these weeks like all within the same year? Or?
Yeah. So we did our first certification. I was just looking at it actually. On Saturday, it was 3 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So this has been a long journey. We don't do things quickly. You don't have to space it out the way that we did.
Yeah.
But in between COVID and in between, high school for the kids and middle school for the kids and all the school activities, very difficult to kind of pace this quickly.
Yeah.
So I think we did our 104 course during spring break one of these years. And between spring breaks and some trip during the summer, that's how we knocked out these courses.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay. So you take the 104 course, you get the bareboat certification, the bareboat cruising certification. What comes next?
Well, then it's where do you want to go? And honestly, there are only a handful of places on the East Coast to rent a boat. Bareboat, one of these kinds of boats. You can get others. Yep. Annapolis, Maryland has some. The Charleston area has some. There are some in the northern Florida areas, Jacksonville, St. Augustine area. And then you can get into the Keys, and there's some around Key West. But beyond that, there is significant charter opportunities abroad, specifically the Bahamas, the BVIs, the UVIs. And then, of course, if you go into Europe, there's significant sailing in the Mediterranean and that kind of stuff. So the options were somewhat limited, and I was frankly nervous about trying to test my skills in international waters.
Okay.
It just adds a layer of complexity that I just don't know that I was completely comfortable with.
Yep.
Worst case scenario, if things go sideways, I want to be able to be in U.S. waters when that happens.
Absolutely. Hey, look, you're in operational risk. You understand things can go wrong, and you're you know how to slowly build up this skill ratio.
Absolutely. I am always thinking about what can go wrong. So we decided to go out of Charleston one more time. At least we knew it would be familiar waters.
Yep.
And so we decided we were going to try this trip and specifically plan it for really to get as much experience doing the things as we could. Because you can rent one of these boats and not go anywhere. There's nothing wrong with just enjoying the time on the boat. That's not exactly the trip I wanted.
Yeah.
But you can. So we decided I wanted to try to plan a trip that gave me as much opportunity to be exposed to the things that I will be exposed to kind of check some boxes off. And so I wanted to anchor somewhere on the ICW.
Okay.
I wanted to pick up a mooring ball. I wanted to pull into a marina that I didn't know already.
Yeah.
And try to do all of those things. And fortunately, this trip really allowed us to do that. We spent 2 days on the ICW and found a gorgeous anchorage to spend the night. And there, the sunset was going down. Another boat for miles. Dolphins were coming up right behind the boat, and you could so close that you could hear them breathe. Yeah. Family pods. It was just really, really tranquil, beautiful nature in those little wetlands down there. It was really great. And then we picked up a mooring ball in Beaufort, South Carolina, which is right in downtown Beaufort. So I had an opportunity to pull the boat up to a mooring ball, which is basically a ball at the surface that's anchored down below, tied up to the mooring ball, which sounds really simple. It's not. It can be, but it's not. And then we took the dinghy into downtown Beaufort and just enjoyed walking around Beaufort. Again, the kind of thing that you do, you have some freedom with what you do in a boat, right? And you don't have to spend your vacation just on the boat. And so we wanted the opportunity to say, okay, well, how does that actually work? Fortunately, no one fell in.
Everybody got pushed in.
No one got pushed in. I was almost amazed that the dinghy was still there when I got back. It didn't float away, so I tied all my knots proper. So all of those were experiences that we were trying to get in this trip, and it turned out to be just fantastic.
So you talked about in the beginning how like sailing is there's great parallels to RVing. And I love, like, you educated me a little bit on the mooring ball and how that all works. And you said, you noted that it sounds easy, but it's not. Like, just for listeners, I wonder if you could kind of just take us to that experience of this mooring ball field and what that sort of is like.
Sure. So in order to make that work, you need someone at the helm driving the boat. And then you need someone else at the bow of the boat trying to pick up this tiny little circle that's connected to a ball. Now, if you picture this, the person at the bow of the boat is 6-7 feet higher than the water line. So you're using a big pole to try to reach this tiny little hole. Okay. Meanwhile, the person at the helm is 25 feet behind you, and there's wind and motor noise, and you can't just say, hey, we need to go forward just a little bit, or go to the left or go to the right. The person at the helm cannot see the ball, right? So as you approach this thing, the person at the helm is completely blind to what's going on. Meanwhile, the person at the bow is running around this boat trying to thread the needle in order to pick up the ball. So you can imagine it can get a little stressful if there is any current or if there are waves that are pushing the boat around. Fortunately, when we pulled up, or other boats that are frankly around.
That's what I'm thinking. Other boats, like how close are these mooring balls together?
They're close enough. I mean, as long as you're connected proper, you're not going to hit each other. They're designed for that. Yeah. But yeah, if you get off of it and you're not paying attention, you absolutely could drift to the boat behind you, and that would be a problem.
Yeah. So I thought it was so cool. Like you were explaining to me, like going back to the RV analogy, like in this particular location, it's almost like picking a campsite when you're in an RV. Like you mentioned that you just pick a mooring ball and, you just kind of register it.
Sometimes there'll be a mooring field and there's definitely assignments, they're numbered or lettered or whatnot. Down in Beaufort, it's kind of first come, first serve. And you basically get on a ball and then you call the marina via the VHF and say, hey, I just picked up a ball, and they charge a credit card and you're good for the night. And they have short-term and long-term rentals.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So the dinghy is attached to the mooring ball, just kind of waiting there for you?
No, the dinghy is attached to the back of the sailboat.
It's on your, okay. So it's your dinghy. Got it. Okay.
It's my dinghy, right. So that's a small inflatable with a 9 horsepower motor on the back of it. This particular boat that we were on was it's a Bali 4.0. So it's a 40-foot catamaran made by Bali is the manufacturer. And they have a fascinating way that they attach their dinghy. Some are a little bit more complicated than others. This one attaches, and then you can actually use one of the winches on board to just pull the dinghy right out of the water. Then when you're ready to use it, you basically lower it right in the water and you're ready to go.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more complicated than what I just said, but that in general, that's how it works.
Yeah. I love this conversation so much. I'm getting to have like my analytical engineer side come out. I love that you brought up the physics of the sailing. I think that's so cool. I'm wondering like if you could share like any stories or things that happened on that sort of that bareboat experience that you guys came across as you were out on the trip.
So obviously, so much of the trip was a learning experience
Yeah.
for us all. I had no expectation that it was going to be a relaxing trip, right? Even with as much ground as we were covering, we went for the whole trip. We were about 170 nautical miles, and everything worked out fine. But every time that we did something, there was always a checklist that I needed to think about. There was something that didn't go the way that I thought it would or should.
Yeah.
And that's all part of the learning process, right? We had no muscle memory associated with how to do any of this stuff. So even simple things as just putting up the sails, it's not that difficult if you know how to do it on that boat. And so much of that was new that there was a lot of learning. We did have one little hiccup with our, and there's always a hiccup on boats. That's what happens. We did lose our generator. And so in the middle of July off of South Carolina, it was a little toasty. Fortunately, that did not damper the trip too much. These things happen. Anything mechanical, sometimes things break. And if that was the worst thing that was going to happen to us, then we were still all good.
For sure. Definitely could have been worse.
But the seas cooperated with us. The wind was a little on the light side, but frankly, given where we are in our journey, that's probably not a bad thing. I have learned that I still have a long way to go to learn how to do this properly, but I at least demonstrated to ourselves that we can do this safely. It's certainly not out of reach. We saw some amazing sunsets. We saw some amazing views on the water. There was some moments of real relaxation when the sails are trimmed, you're headed in the right direction, you're not in any danger, and we as a family could just kind of chill and detach for a few minutes, and that was really nice.
I'm curious, like that very first time that you and your wife went down for that weekend and the motors went off and you had that like spark that got ignited inside of you. Were you able to connect with that again on these other trips?
No, in fairness, I wasn't. And I was looking for that moment. And in fairness to your question, that did not happen. But what did happen were so many things that we didn't expect. The color of the water and how it changes from 1 mile to the next. The significant amount of marine life that we did see was the dolphins were just absolutely amazing. The sunsets were amazing. Doing something that we hadn't done before and conquering might be a little strong, but getting through it, those moments were what I'll remember from this trip. I did not get the spark like I did that first time.
Why do you think that was? Do you think it was the sort of the stress of having the responsibility and the weight of being in charge?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Because there was no muscle memory in anything that we were doing. Absolutely everything that we did. It's not like it felt like it was work, but it was hard. It was hard. Everything that we did, every morning you had to check the engines and go through that process. Every time we left somewhere, there was stress to make sure that we were doing it properly. Every time we put the sails up and took them down, it was something we hadn't done before. So not as much relaxing, but I had anticipated that. I truly believe as we get better at doing all of this stuff and doing these routine things become normalized, I absolutely believe that, we'll have those moments again where things start to click.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, like, I'm just imagining you guys like pulling out of Charleston Harbor with no help, right? It's just you guys. It's just you and your family. Like, what was that? What were those initial moments like?
I tell you, I was white knuckled when we first left Charleston Harbor. The way that we went, we actually I forget the name of the bridge, but very quickly you have to go through a bridge to get into the ICW,
Mm-hmm.
and the bridge opening wasn't going to be for another 20 minutes or so. And so I had to hold the boat in position for 20 minutes. The current wasn't going in the direction that I needed it to go. So I was basically having to fight that. And again, you would not think that keeping a boat in one position would be that big of a chore. But it's like the first time you go on the highway as a new driver. I mean, I was, white knuckled.
Yeah.
It's not that I hadn't done it before, seen it done, but this was the first time that it was all up to me to make sure we stayed in the middle of the channel and communicate with the bridge. And when the bridge finally opens, get through the bridge without hitting anything. That was all putting all that together. I know it sounds so simple, but when you're on the boat doing it for the first time, there was some white knuckled moments.
Yeah, it's scary. I get it. Often on this podcast, I ask guests about one of my favorite words. It's the word awe. And the definition that I like the most for that word is a feeling of reverential respect mixed with fear and wonder. And somehow I feel like you must have experienced some moments of awe on that boat.
Many times. There's no doubt. Absolutely. I was, especially when we anchored, where we anchored, I had done my research. I knew that my anchorage were good spots.
Yeah.
But again, never have done it before. There's always a concern that your anchor is going to slip.
Okay.
Right. And you're going to drag your anchor. Well, and your boat's going to go wherever it goes, kind of thing. And my fear, one fear I had many, but one fear I had on this trip was that we were going to slip in the middle of the night. And what happens then?
Yeah.
I was some quasi prepared for that. And I was very fortunate at the end of the day, we did not slip. But as I woke up many times throughout the night, and eventually when the sun came up, I absolutely had some awe moments looking out and realizing that we did not run ashore in the middle of the night. I was very fortunate that all of that worked out the way it was supposed to.
Oh man, you're lighting me up. I'm so excited. This is something I definitely want to do at some point. What's next for you and your family on this sailing journey?
Yeah, so I think at this point, now that I've checked all the boxes to give me confidence that we can do this, and not just the theory behind it, right? Book work is one thing, but practical experience is a whole nother thing. The next step for us is probably to go down to the BVIs and sail around Caribbean water, where everywhere you go, everywhere you look, it's stunning. Yeah. And the wind is perfect, and that's just where everybody seems to go to that likes to sail.
And the certification that you have is recognized there.
It is. Now, boat operators are still, I'd say, suspect with your experience, and so they will do a thorough checkout, I am sure. As part of the process, I absolutely will have to give a sailing resume. So I will describe in detail the sailing experience I have, both in the certification courses, but also any private lessons that I may have taken to help get me ready. And then they will decide whether or not they want you driving their $1 million boat or not. We go from there.
Yeah.
But after this experience, I absolutely feel confident that I'm not going to damage the boat. I'm not going to, have any safety issues or injure ourselves. These boats are very, very safe. And with a little bit of common sense and a little bit of experience, you absolutely can make this work.
Yeah. Michael, I'm curious, like 3 years ago, you didn't even have this wasn't even on your radar. Like you had no idea you had an interest in sailing. And now we're having this conversation where you're helping educate me and listeners on, this process that sounds so awesome. Like, What's that like for you? Just looking back like 3 years ago, like,
Yeah, I mean, really, it's a whole new world has opened up with this.
yeah.
My wife and I have thought for many years where we might want to get a second home,
Mhm.
and for many many years we don't have an answer for that. It is very possible that our second home option might be a big sailboat that we sail around whenever we have interest, and make that more of our not just vacation time, but more of a long term type
Yeah.
of thing. I don't know that I'm quite ready to
Sure.
live full time on a sailboat, but I could absolutely see it being a long term type of style.
Are you surprised with yourself?
A little bit. I'm surprised that we were able to do it so effortlessly as a family.
Mhm.
Uh, four individuals, different learning styles, different interests, but all coming together to do this and have fun doing it. I can't say I was surprised because we have a phenomenal family, but until you do it, you don't really know
Yeah.
what you're capable of.
Yeah.
And so this absolutely pushed some limits. It pushed some boundaries. And as a family, we all, I would say, exceeded my expectations of doing this, especially as hot as it was that week. It could have been miserable. We absolutely could have been miserable,
Yeah.
but we weren't. We had a phenomenal time in spite of the heat, and we all learned a tremendous amount of knowledge doing it. I hope the kids will remember it for a long time. I know I will.
No doubt. You mentioned life lessons. Are there one or two you might be able to share?
I would say it's the knots, the knots that you learn have very practical, useful, help. And I am constantly now looking at life situations and go, well, I could use this knot, or I could use that knot, or if I just had a little rope here, I can rig that up. Those types of things I found were very helpful.
That's so fun. So, Michael, I'm just curious for people listening. Like, I am super inspired by your story. Specifically because doing this kind of adventure is something that I've always been interested in. But for people that are listening that, maybe have felt that little spark like that you felt during that weekend where you're like, man, this is cool. But maybe they just haven't taken that next step. They didn't do the research or they didn't, take that next step to do the 101 course that you guys did. What advice would you have for people in terms of getting started?
Yeah, after we took the 101 and 103 courses, there was certainly a period that we were debating whether or not this was something that we wanted to do more. I mean, was it just a thing that we tried and yeah, we tried it, or was it something that we really wanted to commit to? And I ultimately came to the conclusion for me that I did not want to have regret about not trying it.
Mm,
Right? We might absolutely have gone through the motions, learned everything, got out on the water, and then realized, well, this is not fun.
yeah.
We're not a boat family. In which case, that would still be a success.
Yeah.
But I knew that we wouldn't be able to figure that out unless we actually did it. And so at that point, I committed myself to say, I don't want to, in 30 years from now, remember back on this time and going, I had the opportunity to try and I didn't try it. So that for me, that's the advice I would give folks that are teeter tottering on a goal or their own spark. Try it. You have nothing to lose but experience. And if you just determine that at the end of the day that wasn't for you, so be it. It's all
Yeah.
good, but at least you tried.
You got to give it a try. I love it. So, Michael, I think that this sailing adventure is going to continue to grow for you. That's my prediction because I see how your face is lit up. Here's the thing, like as this story progresses and it gets bigger and bigger, like at some point Hollywood is going to pick up on your life story and your family, and they're going to want to make a movie about the epic sailing adventures that you go on. And when they do, I want to know who's going to be the Hollywood actor that's going to play you in your movie.
I think it's probably going to have to be Sam Hewen.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Because he's Scottish and my wife likes him.
Okay. Okay. I love it. All right. What's the movie going to be called?
I tried.
That's amazing. I love that. I tried. What a great title. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to sit with that. I really like that. That's awesome. Thank you so much for the time today. I really appreciate it. I'm super inspired. You got me all fired up. If none of my listeners aren't interested in sailing, I can tell you that I am. So I hope other people that enjoyed this as much as I have, but I'm so fired up about this.
Well, thank you, Scott. And hey, I'm happy to be on your crew any day.
Well, I appreciate it. If anybody wants to learn more about the Sailing Association or even your journeys, what's the best way for them to do that?
Happy to have them reach out to me directly. You're welcome to provide my contact information. Or the journey that I took started at the Charleston Sailing School. And Lynn and Will, who own the Charleston Sailing School, are phenomenal people to work with, and I'm sure would love to speak to them.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate it. And for those listening, I hope you've been inspired today as much as I have. I hope Michael's story has encouraged you to listen to the voice inside that calls you to adventure, because we want to hear your story next. If you have a story to tell or just need a nudge to create one, please send me an email. We'd also appreciate it if you'd help us spread the word by leaving a review and sharing or tagging Inspire Campfire in your social media. And until next time, I want to encourage you to get outside. Thanks for listening. Michael, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Scott.